All right.
So where,
That means it's recorded.
yes,
Does
that's
it?
right. So, watch what you say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
so thank you, Richard. What are you doing?
I'm just getting my notes together.
Okay,
There you are. You see, I even do notes
right.
for
So
you.
this is good
Okay.
preparation
All
because
right.
this is a big deal for you.
What is Mensch?
No, appearing on the
Oh, the bibliophile.
maybe appearing on the bibliophile. I'm not sure.
This is bigger than being interviewed by Meghan Markle. It's so big.
Over the years, Richard Charkin, thank you, by the way, for appearing on the show again.
It's my pleasure. I have to say, Nigel, my sessions with you have been really enjoyable for me. Whether they are for you or for your listeners, I have no idea.
Over the years, we've talked about, among other things, great publishers, including Paul Hamlin. And we've learned about different, equally successful approaches to publishing, codfish and elephants. We've learned that things are often done better by measuring them. But today, I'd like to talk about what you've learned in the first 4 or 5 years of having established. It's not an insult to call it a micro publishing company.
It's a compliment.
It's called Mensch Publishing. And I just want to go to your site, and I have done so. Yeah, well, first of all, on your About page, you say there's no mission statement or editorial strategy other than to help authors reach readers with minimal intervention and maximum impact, and to reward them proportionally. And then at the bottom you say, I trust Mensch will live up to its name. And you also talk about not wanting to provide any meaningless platitudes. So I'm going to start with, first of all, my mission, and it's filled with meaningless platitudes. So here we go. My mission over the past decade has been to try to understand the technology, the object, the phenomenon of the book. And I think this is important because it's the best known way to convey big, complex, significant, serious, entertaining, amusing ideas to one another. And the better we do that, the more effectively we can communicate, and that means the world will be a better place.
That is not a mission statement. It's an essay, a micro essay, but an essay nonetheless. And I wouldn't disagree with a word of it.
Getting that out of the way, perhaps we can have a look at your list. You've published now 20 books, correct?
Well, I just added them up, and that is correct, plus a few paperback versions of the same books.
Okay. So what I find really interesting is that, can I read your character? Can I tell who you are by looking at those 20 books?
No. No, and neither should you be able to.
Okay.
It's not my character that matters, it's the character of the authors, and each one is individual.
Of course. But it's your taste, and you decided to pull the trigger or not pull the trigger.
Yes. But not in order to express my character or personality, in order to help the author express theirs. And in pulling the trigger, there are half a dozen quite frequently conflicting drivers, criteria towards making that decision to pull the trigger. I could run through them if you like, but they're pretty obvious.
No, I think that'd be useful, because if we want to make the world a better place, we want to give advice based on your experience with books.
Okay. So, here are the criteria.
Okay.
The first, and probably the most important, is that the author wants to publish with me, and I want to publish with the author, not for reasons of the book necessarily, but because of a relationship. Now, quite frequently, the authors I already have a relationship with, so that's just the way it is. And why would they come to me if they did not have a relationship? They can go to other publishers. So basically, do I like the author? Does the author like me?
Yeah.
Second consideration, and this is pretty basic, it's speed. If the author says, yeah, but it'll take me 3 years to complete, well, I'll be 76 in 3 years' time, and I don't know how long I can keep going. Right. And anyway, it's boring waiting for stuff. So a second consideration is the manuscript's got to be complete, or near as complete as it's going to be. There's not, I don't commission stuff to be written in the future.
You do commission stuff, though, don't you?
Yes. Well, when you say commission, it depends what you mean.
Well, that Brexit.
Only on one or two occasions have I asked someone to write a book. One of the early books was I asked a guy to write a book about Britain post-Brexit.
Yeah.
Seemed like a good idea and worked out.
The fact that you commissioned that, doesn't that tell me about you?
Yeah. Oh, well, I suppose in that instance, the fact that I thought Brexit was a complete shambles and a disaster and would take a long time to recover, yeah, that's that book, and other books would be other things. So I wouldn't draw any. I could have as easily written commissioned a book saying Brexit's great. I suppose I might have done. I wouldn't have any objection in principle, but I would find it hard to get enthusiastic. It's true, but so by and large, completed manuscripts. Third consideration is it right for the author to be represented by me? So, for instance, young adult fiction, which is a booming area, I won't touch with a barge pole because I wouldn't have the faintest idea how to help the author find their market. And indeed, I think the big publishers do an amazingly good job. So I would say no to all of them. Books requiring colour. Well, if you want to publish economically in colour, you need to have global printing, international printing, and I don't think I'm set up to control that or to get the best prices or to do a good job, so I would say no.
On that point, so you basically search for the best price and the best quality from printers around the world? You do that?
Well, I don't. I basically I only use two printers. One is Ingram, and the other is CPI, which is a French-owned British printer.
Okay.
So I use CPI for paperbacks and hardbacks in the UK, and Ingram when I'm going print on demand worldwide. So I don't need the hassle of doing colour. I can do colour. In fact, CPI can do colour, but it's not high on my priority list. The third is that I don't think I'll lose money on the book. I don't always think I'm going to make a lot of money, but I don't like taking books on that I'm going to lose money on. Again, not a philosophical angle, just a practical one. I started the business with £10,000, which I asked my wife's permission to play money, if you like, opened an account called Midge Publishing, and I'd be very, very embarrassed and would suffer quite a lot of grief if that 10,000 disappeared. So I can't, and touch wood, it's fine. It's fine. So what other criteria? I think those are they. Yeah. Oh, and then the biggest criterion of all, which is called luck.
Yeah.
So I have to say I don't go out to seek new books. They come to me, not because I'm great, but because I'm there.
Well, it's
so if people
yes,
know me.
Exactly. I mean, we should mention, of course, that you've had a very storied and successful career in the publishing business. You do have an extraordinary net or web of collection of good friends and people who know this business.
That's true. I've got a number here. So before this conversation, I did a little bit of research about Mensch. So it's now it will be 4 years in February since the first book was published. The first book was written by a friend of mine, so I didn't have to worry about finding him. He found me. Since then, my email folder,
right,
called Submissions, has 549 emails in it. That isn't for 549 submissions, because there might be 2 or 3 emails before submission becomes a non-submission by being rejected. Usually I reject within 24 hours, so it's really just 2 emails in and out, sometimes a few more. There's no shortage.
You did say somewhere that shortly after announcing the founding of the company, you got 100 submissions, and you responded to every single one of them.
That still holds true. So the 100 or so is probably, if I take that 549 number, it's probably 300 now.
Yeah.
And every time there's a bit of publicity for something, you get a kick upwards with people writing in and me rejecting. I would tell you, if there's one lesson I've learned, you said it should be about lessons, I've become really good. Self-congratulation, it's true, but I am really good at rejecting submissions.
So, in other words, how long does it take for you to reject a manuscript?
24 hours.
Right. In other words, you read the first chapter and that's enough?
Yeah. Well, I frequently wouldn't read the first chapter.
No, not that much.
Well, if they say this is the most brilliant young adult thing since Harry Potter, I say no. You're too good for me. I don't deserve you. All that, but I do get good fan mail.
So you respond in obviously a very positive but negative way.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck with it. Yeah. It sounds great, but not for me. I'm too old, or I'm too poor, or I'm too ignorant.
I see. Yeah. Self-effacing as usual.
Yes. So where were we? We're on.
Well, we're lessons. We're lessons here, and you said that you have 500 odd emails in your submission file.
Yeah. Should we talk about emails, because it's quite an important thing that I've learned. There used to be a British motor company called British Leyland. It owned all sorts of car brands: MG, Triumph, Austin, Morris, Rover. It was an umbrella, and it was absolutely useless. They made the worst cars. They were in charge of the almost single-handed destruction of the British car industry.
No, wait, Richard?
Yeah?
You said that these were shitty cars that they made. Well, when I was 20, my uncle allowed me to drive a beautiful, beautiful Rover with leather seats and walnut panel all around Wales. It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, but that was pre-British Leyland. That was the original Rover. When British Leyland took over all these brands, anyway.
Okay.
The statistic that impressed me, they had one really good idea, which was called the Mini. But even with the Mini, they managed to screw things up and here's the statistics. For every Mini that was sold, the paperwork weighed more than the car.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a preamble. You can't weigh emails, but the number of emails which relate to a particular title is some guide to the overhead associated with that title.
Okay.
So as I keep all these titles in folders, I can see how many emails. And remember that I only do part of the job. I don't do the physical distribution. No. and I'm sure within the warehouses there are lots of emails flying around, send these books here. I don't do the sales. That's done. So this is just really the editorial production design and author communications of a book. And it's typically 1,000 emails per book. Now, if you think that the reading of an email, the composition of the response, blah, blah, even if you say that's $2, which is nothing, that's still $2,000 of unaccounted overhead on a book. And a lot of books sell 1,000 copies, say, or fewer. But if it's $2,000 in emails and you only sell 1,000, that's $2 per copy, which is probably more than the print cost. So one of the lessons I've learned is about overhead, and I mean, I've always understood about overhead, but very, very specifically, how many emails get sent. And I think, particularly when you see in corporations emails with a circulation list of 30 or 40 people, each of whom reads this email and then files it somewhere or replies or whatever. Anyway, that's a lesson.
But what is the lesson? I mean, what you want is someone who understands what you want and you understand what they want, and you don't have to waste a bunch of time going back and forth. Is that what you're saying?
Or you make the emails what they should be, i.e., here are 3 questions, 1, 2, and 3, answer. And the more uncertainty, like maybe we should do this, that, or the other, and I'll get back to you in a week. Or another thing, I mean, the speed of response.
Oh, yes. That came up in our last conversation.
Yeah, but frequently it's a month before you get it, by which time the issues disappeared or become worse. It's a little like getting people in hospital. The best thing is get them in quick, fix things quick. Speed is another lesson, which the industry still has to learn. I don't think it's getting faster. I think, if anything, it's getting slower. As there is more fear of mistakes in the big corporations, particularly, making mistakes is perceived to be not very good. And, it's true, it's not, but we do make mistakes, and it's better to make a mistake than do nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's better to make mistakes measuring the thing rather than cutting it, of course, but so that's a lesson.
Yeah. The things that worry, how do I put it? Contractual stuff. I'm not terrible at legal things, but I really wouldn't describe myself as an expert or particularly interested. But I think that the corporate obsession with contractual matters is actually quite damaging. I mean, we've all seen it where you see a 20-page contract when you want to go and work at set up an account with Riverside. They have some legal contractual stuff down the side which, if you read it, you'd be appalled. So you don't. You just say, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's covering them, but it's not covering you. So my contract is as simple as I can make it. It's still not simple enough. The best deals are done without all that. The best deals are done with well-meaning people. There was quite a good example recently. I better not name the author, but I have a contract with this author, which is my normal contract, which is world rights, all languages, blah, blah. Yeah,
you get those.
Yeah. But one thing that I don't include in the contract is movie rights. That's a different game. So it's not in my contract. And much to my surprise, on one of the books, I managed to get a movie deal.
That's great.
Which is great. Absolutely. I'd never done one before.
Right.
But so I negotiated the deal, and then I looked at the contract to see what share went to the author and what share went to me, to discover, to my horror, that I didn't actually have the rights. So I rang up a distinguished literary agent and said, tell me, if you had sold the rights for a movie for an author, what share would you keep? as agent. And he said, well, it depends. If it's a well-established author, I would keep 15%. If it was a new author, I would, because it's harder work, I would keep 20%.
Okay.
So I rang the author up and explained to him that I just sold the rights, but I didn't have them. And therefore we had to have a codicil as an agreement on how we shared the money. And I told him exactly what the literary agent had said to me. And he said, well, then you must keep 20%. Fine. Actually, the other side of the coin, while we're on this one, was when negotiating the deal, it was with a Hollywood showbiz lawyer. So she rang to say her boss had said we had to do a deal, and where did I practice? I said, practice? I don't know what you mean. She said, well, which attorney firm do you work for? And I said, I don't work for an attorney firm. Right. I'm a publisher. Oh, she said, that makes this almost impossible to do. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, if I'm dealing with someone who's not an attorney and I rip them off, she didn't use that word, but similar, they can sue me. You could sue me for ripping you off, and that would be terrible. So I can only deal with other attorneys. Because if under California law, apparently, if the person you're negotiating with is defenseless in a way, then you've overstepped the mark and you've ripped them off. So I said to her, well, look, tell you what, I've got one idea. Why don't you not rip me off? And if you don't rip me off, I can't sue you. She was slightly baffled. But
why don't you pretend like you're a human being?
Yeah, exactly. I said, exactly that. So I said, why don't you draft a contract, which is a contract that you think would be fair,
right,
and send it to me. And of course, I then shared it with a lawyer,
right,
who said, "My God, that contract's really good. It's more or less what we'd have got to after 3 weeks negotiating."
Right.
I said, "Well, that's it. We've saved a lot of money there." Anyway, that's just a side story.
Good. Well, now, okay, just to finish that off, though, this is the thing that I thought was interesting. You started off with £10,000. Now, that's not insignificant. But it's not out of the reach of poor people. In other words, you don't have to be rich necessarily to be doing what you're doing. Now, it just turns out that all your friends are rich, and a lot of people that you're publishing are rich. But this isn't necessarily an elitist pastime.
Not at all. Do you know there are I've got the number somewhere. Hang on, let me look it up. I've got the number of publishers who are registered for VAT, which is a good sign that they're a business rather than just self-publishing. Mm-hmm. In the UK, there are 2,500 VAT registered publishers in the UK. Okay. That's a big number.
Actually, it's not that big. No, I thought it would be much bigger than that.
Why?
Well, because if anyone...
You've registered for...
You got 60 million or 70 million people there.
This is 2,500 publishers.
No, I understand.
People. But you have to... I mean, there's no point registering unless you have revenues of 70,000 or above. Okay. So you wouldn't register unless you were actually a sort of business. Yeah. So I think 2,500 is a lot. Okay. And when people talk about the sort of top 10 publishers or top 4, big 4, well, there's another 2,400 and whatever. And I think it's a good sign. I think it's a sign of creativity.
I think that's important here. Is the advice that you're giving isn't just for rich people. The more people that decide to do what you're doing. You know, one of the wonderful things about the old days before all the conglomerates was that we really did have personalities in publishing, and that the publisher what, this was his personality, what he chose. I mean, sort of, maybe it reflected the establishment.
No, it's reflecting your taste, because the publishers you are referring, I mean, I follow you quite, I know what you like, I think, are the sort of people, like, say, Secker and Warburg.
That's right.
Or Hamish Hamilton.
Sure.
Yeah, these are all basically literary publishers, right. Yes. But when you come to the more generalised publisher, then it's less that. I mean, even, for instance, in the UK, we have a very, very good independent publisher called Profile Books, which was founded not so long ago, maybe 20 years ago, by a guy called Andrew Franklin, who had been fired from Hamish Hamilton for I don't know what. But anyway, he set up on his own, and it's now a thriving business. Now, I'm pretty sure I know what his taste is, which is quality non-fiction. But he now has an empire which is made up of the tastes of lots of editors. Yeah. And it changes. But when he started, it was clear. I mean, there are very few who... I mean, Faber would be an example of a company that has still somehow maintained that. Bloomsbury has that reputation, but of course, most of its stuff comes from non-literary fiction, which is... It started that way. Yeah. But it's moved. Okay. And there will be new people coming up, like One World, who are terrific fiction publishers, and they'll either grow or be bought, and then it will be diluted. So I think there's plenty of that sort of thing around. I think the 10,000 is a good example of how you can do it.
How's the bank account looking right now? What is it?
It's 130,000. I actually got the numbers. I don't have them up till December. But since we started, so over the 4 years, we've had sales of 384,000 and profits, or whatever you want to call it, of 152 before tax. Before tax and before paying me. So if you paid me 40,000 a year, the profits would be zero. But that's okay. So basically, that 152, 140 has converted into cash.
Right.
The 10,000 has become. So not terrible.
No.
Could be better. I wouldn't mind it being better, but that's not the point.
Well, the point wasn't the point. Basically, you wanted to test your ideas in the real world and see if you could float.
Precisely.
Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, I measure success not by those numbers, although I'd be very disappointed if they were worse. Yeah. But on a few criteria. The first is that I think every author I've published, maybe bar one, has wanted me to publish their next book.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice.
Yeah.
The second is that they've all remained friends, even if they don't write another book.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes when they want another book, I say no, just because it's not in my genre or whatever.
Yeah.
And the third one, which is interesting, which is when I started, my contractual terms, which are the same for everyone, no exceptions, are unappealing to literary agents. They're unappealing because it's the same for everyone. They can't get a better deal for their client than they could get from any other client. So I wasn't anticipating having authors represented by literary agents. It turns out that half the books are represented by literary agents, and, to be fair, they've added value.
Good. That's unusual coming from you.
I'm pleased.
Yeah.
Very unusual.
Yeah.
And maybe I've just been lucky with the ones I've got. But, well, once you take away the adversarial nature of the contract, so on day one, when you sign a contract, an author and an agent sign a contract, the agent's job is to maximise the advance to the advantage of their client and to the disadvantage of the publisher. So the moment the ink is dried, you're at war, right? It's their job for me to fail, and vice versa. Once you take that out of the equation, because there is no advance, it's actually a happier relationship all round. We're all on the same side.
Well, the argument that the literary agents use is, well, these authors are poor. They need to survive. They need this up front because they can't afford their heating bill.
Yeah, well, that's right.
It helps.
Can't afford their heating bill. They won't come to me.
Well, I was going to say it helps. It helps that pretty well all of your authors are rich.
No, that's not true. That's not true. But equally, none of them depend on it.
Yeah.
For their livelihood.
Right. Okay.
I think that's a different way of putting it.
Okay. Here's another observation about your list. A lot of them are, they were either already journalists, or they had a career in journalism, or they were established writers, or in some cases celebrities. That's a very interesting, shrewd way of ensuring that they get coverage, certainly, and that you don't have to work so hard or take the risk.
Yeah. Once the terms of my contract are that they get 25% of anything I get. So it's in their interest that I get as much as possible, and it's my interest that they sell as many as possible. And so it's certainly true that journalists can be helpful in getting coverage.
Yeah.
But, coverage in newspapers, it's not sure it makes that much difference to sales.
Yeah.
But certainly having articulate authors who can be called upon to go on radio or TV or to opine in social media on one thing or another is incredibly helpful. But I've only really got one celebrity, and she's only a celebrity in Britain. She's not a celebrity anywhere else, or not, which is this cook lady called Delia Smith,
Right.
who is probably Britain's most trusted woman. She was the second most trusted until recently, when the Queen died. Delia's second only to the Queen, so she's now the most trusted. And she's a celebrity. So she's on radio on Christmas Day, this coming Christmas Day, and things. So that helps.
Yeah, but you've also got Richard Branson's sister. I mean, that's kind of celebrity by blood.
That's sort of meta celebrity, I think you'd call that. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great if they've got, but all authors have some connection or another, or one hopes so. But I think more to the point is that they see their role as helping to sell the book. They don't see it solely as mine.
No.
And for half the books, I use a professional publicist. For the other half, I do it myself.
Yeah, tell me about.
I'm not sure.
Tell me about Ruth. Is it Ruth?
Ruth Gillick. Yeah. Ruth's a fantastic professional publicist. She has a very small team, I think, of one, and she works for many publishers. She works for Bloomsbury. She works for Profile. She's just a good thing. I think I first knew her when she worked at Oxford, and she if I give her a book to do, she does it. But sometimes,
what does that mean?
Well, what it means is she gets behind the book. She makes sure that she's got these very good mailing lists of journalists and all the rest of it. She chases up. Oh my God, it's a lot of work. A lot of it's legwork that may not pay off. In fact, probably 90%. It's like the usual advertising thing. It mainly doesn't pay off. But she does a fantastic job. But there are some books where the market's so clear that there's no point. So I did one book about the history of Lord's cricket ground.
Right, I love that one.
Well, the only people who are going to buy that are members of Lord's, and so it wasn't hard to find them. Or indeed, I published a book by a well-known jewellery designer, who's a designer to the rich and the famous. And I said, I'll tell you what, the marketing strategy is I give you 20 copies of your book, send them to your best friends, and have them tweet about it.
Yes.
He did, and it worked, and then we reprinted that.
What was the run, the first one?
I think normally about 1,500.
Okay.
1,500, and then you reprint in thousands.
Yeah.
Thousand.
Okay.
That will be normal. Sometimes I do fewer than that. Sometimes with Delia Smith's book, obviously, I did more.
Yeah.
I've got the numbers here,
Oh,
actually,
okay.
if you're interested.
Yes, I am.
The top, well, I shouldn't really go into but Delia was our bestseller.
Yes.
With 9,000.
Right.
The second best one, I was really pleased about, was a woman called Lee Janogly, a book that I was very, very suspicious. It's called Getting Old, Deal With It. And I only took it on because she knew my auntie. It seemed like a terrible reason, but anyway, I did. And she's come in number 2 at 8,000.
Is that about working out or something as an old person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
I got to read that.
Yes, it's worth it. Getting old, deal with it. And the key word was deal. Don't moan, because we're all going to get old. She's 80-something years old and as fit as a fiddle. And she runs a Keep Fit class for my auntie. And then the third one was my first book, my first author, Guy Kennaway, 7,000. Then we're down at 5,000, 4,000. But they're reasonable numbers. Yeah. They're not terrible numbers. I mean, I've yet to have the one that sells 1 million.
Yes, but you've had a prize winner, right? Or two?
Yeah, Guy Kennaway won a prize for The Accidental Collector, won the P.G. Wodehouse Best Comic Novel of the Year, and all that. And that's nice, but it doesn't necessarily turn into bestsellers. I've had a number of translations, like Korean, Arabic.
Oh, yeah.
My favourite one is Latvian.
Nice.
The Accidental Collector is being translated into Latvian.
Richard, tell me what the Accidental Collector's about.
I can. It's about the contemporary art world,
right?
And it's a complete piss take on the absurdity, the arrogance, the nonsense, the money. So a guy who wants to be a chef becomes the world's expert on contemporary art without knowing anything. So it's a farce based on the likes of Tracy Emin and things like that.
I see.
The author knows them all. Yeah. So he knows what a lot of bullshit goes on as well. The book I shouldn't really say this, but the other aspect is I try to proofread every book I publish for two reasons. One is it saves money because I don't pay myself. Second reason is it forces me to read every word of the book.
Yes. So you can talk about it with the authors, of course.
Absolutely. And thirdly, I'm not terrible at it. I'm not great, but I'm at least as good as most of the other people I'm likely to give the job to.
Yeah.
So I do that. So the one that I read where I had the most fun, but I had to read it like 6 times because for various editorial reasons, was this one, I Fear for This Boy by Theo Fennell. The title... He was at a British public school called Eton, and he was forced to leave prematurely for too much association with illegal substances
Right.
of one sort or
Yes.
another. Anyway, that was I fear for this boy was his headmaster's report on his last leaving report, and how right he was. The book is complete. It's 26 chapters of one disaster after another in this guy's life. He's ended up okay, and it's such fun.
That's a theme for sure. Many of your books are funny and humorous, and in fact, that's as important a criteria as any other.
Yeah, but some books can't be funny. It's nice. It's nice if they can,
There's humor in death, for example.
and in many things. Not you can't always.
No, but it's quite a striking characteristic of your list.
Yeah, I suppose it is. It was unintentional, Nigel. I can tell you, it just happens.
Okay, Richard, are you at capacity?
Yes. Yes. I have about half a dozen or maybe more responsibilities, roles, jobs. I'm on various boards and things. And there is no one but me. So I would say that I don't think I would want to do more than 4 or 5 books a year, new books a year. Of course, every time you add a new book, it goes to the backlist. So right now, I've just finished doing the quarterly royalties. I calculate and pay the royalties. And it's now quite a lot. It's 20. 20 statements I have to do. And next year, it'll probably be 25 or so. So nothing goes away.
Well, that's the whole idea, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But equally, it means I'm very, very cautious about taking stuff on. And I am getting offered really good stuff. Mm. And sometimes I just have to say no, genuinely, that I'm full up. I mean, I've got a really good novelist joining the list, and I'm sure when I publish him, we'll get more, and I'll have to fight them off.
Oh, so you're tiptoeing into fiction a bit then?
I try to avoid it, as I told the author. Yeah, I remember once telling Jeffrey Archer that we signed up Jeffrey Archer, and he said, "But I gather that you're not very keen on fiction."
Right.
This is when I was at Macmillan, and I said, "That's absolutely right." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, it usually loses money." I said, "In your case, it might not. That's why, but it's not a thing I would choose to do."
Who's the author?
This new one, he's called. His name is David Taylor. He's known as DJ Taylor. If you do a thing on him, he's a literary figure. Was Guardian books editor. Has done he's been Booker shortlisted and things like that. Right. So it's very nice. It's real proper literary about rock and roll as well, which I approve of. In the 70s, it's my period, so I get it.
I haven't read it, but David Mitchell wrote a rock and roll novel.
Yeah, I haven't read it either. It's a look. There's a whole bunch of people my age or younger than me for whom rock and roll was a big deal. So it's not surprising.
Yeah,
really.
Okay, so what's been the most difficult thing for you?
I think so my sales and distribution are handled by Bloomsbury, unless I do the Ingram route. And I find dealing with a large organisation hard, particularly one that I understand and I know and I respect and value. Mm-hmm. But just the complexity of those organisations is very hard to deal with. So I can understand how authors feel that they're not getting full treatment because they ring up their editor and say, I'm flying to Tokyo tomorrow. Will there be copies of my book in the airport bookstore at Narita? And for the editor to discover whether that's feasible or not, or to give a sensible answer, is almost impossible, because they'll have to go through 7 layers of management to find out. And in a way, I'm discovering that. So for instance, if there's a book I'm doing, this is by a surgeon.
Oh, yes, yes.
Emergency.
Lovely cover, by the way, lovely.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So he's big in Australia, the US, and the UK. In order to get simultaneous publication, because the publicity will hit everywhere, because the media are global now, you have to have copies 5 months before you publish. I find that truly frustrating.
You have to have them 5 months in advance, so what? You can send them out to all the media, or what?
So that you can put them in a ship, which takes X weeks to get to Australia.
Yeah.
To get shipped from the docks into the warehouse, and then when it gets to their warehouse, they have to allow 6 weeks to distribute it to the shops. Which is why I find the print-on-demand solution, where you send electrons rather than books, really rather attractive.
Better on the environment.
So I think and better on the environment, yeah, absolutely. But I think that frustration of old systems, which is, Bloomsbury is as good or better than anyone at trying to find ways around it. So this is not a criticism of them.
No.
It's just a fact of the old way of doing things, which will change, but we're in the middle of the change, and so it hasn't completely happened yet.
What do you find most depressing?
Well, one specific, I don't know about most depressing, but one I find really awful is libraries. Not so much in the United States, but definitely in the United Kingdom. The library service has been, I think, more than decimated. The amount of money spent on it has really gone through the floor. And so not having the support of a good library system, which not only supports books, it supports literacy and diversity in, how do people learn, how to become, etc. So I think the demise of the public library, I find really depressing. And the fact that no one in government cares. No one cares.
Is it as bad as all that? I mean, if I go to the library, I can find pretty well whatever book I want. I just have to wait a bit to get it shipped to the branch.
Well, you're speaking about Canada there, I imagine.
Yeah.
In Britain, it's really shocking, but it's not a question of picking an individual book, because you can always go to Amazon and buy it. It's having a library with librarians who know what they're talking about, particularly for kids. I used to go into the Whitechapel, which is in the East End of London library, and the shelves were full of Barbara Cartland novels and things like that. The environment, the place, the area was almost entirely Bangladeshi, who didn't give a damn about Barbara Cartland or whoever it might be, Catherine Cookson or whoever. They wanted their own, so they didn't go to the library. Of course they didn't go to the library. It was a shithole.
Yeah.
And then eventually the library closed.
It was irrelevant.
No one goes
irrelevant to them.
Yeah. And good libraries need to be refreshed constantly. I mean, just to give you a sense of this, I think the British library system costs around 1.3 billion pounds a year.
Okay.
And of that 1.3 billion, 50 million is spent on books. And work out there's, let's say, 100,000 new titles a year across 10,000 libraries, or whatever the number of libraries is, and you'll see how few books they buy per library per year. It's tiny. It's really tiny.
Right.
And they're turning them into yoga centres and coffee bars.
Yeah,
that's all very well, but that's not what a library's for.
It's not that that's not important. It's just that they're basically bailing on books. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you want to go to have a good yoga session, go to a yoga class somewhere.
Right.
And if you want a good coffee, go to a good coffee place. But libraries are there for good books. And if they don't have the right selection, you don't bother to go. So that's bad. Anything else that's bad? Yeah, the complexity is still bad. I still find it depressing that we make things so much more complicated than we need to. And I haven't fixed it, however hard I try. I think the other thing is, I think nationalism. People still, well, I'm speaking now as an English language publisher. People still ask me about the market in the UK. And of course there is a market in the UK, but actually as a publisher, the UK is only a fraction of your market. In fact, I've just got some numbers. The British publishers, roughly 60 to 70% of books are sold not in the UK. And yet, within the publishing houses, there's a great emphasis on what your local people think of it and what your local media is thinking of it, as opposed to thinking of the world. We are not a UK business, we're an English language business. It's language, not country, I think, that matters. And yet people haven't quite got their heads around it. It's taken a time. They're getting there.
Well, it just means that you can make a good go of it in whatever country, English-speaking country you live in, because you have access to a worldwide market, right?
Yeah, but you see, when people are thinking about the marketing, say the publicity, they think of the Times, they might even think of the Times Supplement. They don't think of the Globe and Mail.
No.
And why not?
Yeah.
And why not the New York Times or the LA Times or the Cincinnati Observer, whatever? It's the mindset that thinks in terms of your local thing that's not right. It's not surprising. It's still the biggest single market. It's smaller than it's less than half the total.
Okay. So, what's been the most successful thing for you then? Do you think? Like, what's worked the best?
I think the discovery that print on demand can be used successfully, and I think others will now. Now I've got some evidence that it can work. There are pluses and minuses, like everything. And the minuses used to outweigh the pluses, but I think the pluses are beginning to outweigh the minuses. So I think that's something that's potentially working well and can work better.
Okay.
In terms of title, I think ironically the I Fear for This Boy is probably long term going to be the best investment, because I think I may be wrong, but I think it's going to be with us in 10 years' time, 20 years' time. Here's the thing, Nigel. The author, for the paperback, rather than marking up any corrections he had on the PDF that I sent him, decided to print out the whole thing and mark up the corrections on print. Sends it to me, so I then transfer those myself to the PDF to get the thing set up. It took me a couple of hours. There were quite a lot of corrections. I rang him up and said, Theo, do you want the proofs that you sent me back? So I don't need them anymore. And he said, why would I want them? And I said, because if by some miracle this book is still being read after you're dead, or even before you're dead, that someone, a scholar, if it's still a success, will want to see the changes that you made. Because they're very subtle. So he changes one adjective for a slightly better adjective. Stuff like that. And that it might just be valuable.
Save everything.
He said, I never thought of that. So I'm sending it back to him.
Very good.
And it might be worth something. I suppose I could keep it. It would be worth something for me, but I think it belongs to him.
It'll be worth more with both of your markings on it.
Well, I didn't put...
You didn't put anything on it.
A regret. I had two regrets. In my contract, it says that I will pay royalties twice a year, and that I can hold back some of the royalty payments against potential returned copies in future periods. Okay? That's in my contract. It's standard. Everyone's contract has that. However, I decided that even though it's in the contract, I will pay quarterly, not twice a year, 4 times a year. And secondly, I would hold nothing back against future returns. Now, the first one I'm sticking with, and will stick with, because although I don't have to do it legally, I think it's right. The second one has been more problematic because sometimes you do get returns and then you have a negative royalty, and so you have to wait for the book to go on selling for maybe forever until that's recouped. So effectively it's a sort of advance by mistake. And I will stick with that as well. But I have to say both of those things are quite painful from time to time.
I see, yeah. So what's been the most pleasing? What's been the most fun about all this?
Oh, I think, well, there's so many bits of fun. I can't tell you how much fun I have.
That's great.
But I think one of the best bits was I got a phone call from an old friend of mine who had got to know Delia Smith, this cook, this most trusted person.
Yeah.
Who had said to him, I'm writing this new book. It's not a cookbook. It's about meditation, things like that, spirituality. And all my publishers have turned it down. And could he advise? So he rang me and said, it's amazing. Delia Smith being turned down. She sold 26 million copies of her books, largely for Penguin. And I said, well, it's completely understandable, because it will have been submitted to the mind, body, spirit department of the company, who probably haven't heard of her because she's 80 years old, and probably don't approve because she's a Christian, traditional, everything they don't necessarily stand for. And also, they didn't have the intelligence to ring up the cookery editor in the next office and say, should we do Delia Smith? Anyway, they all said no, I said yes, and it's been just enormous fun.
That's great.
And some of the fun is the heads of those companies saying, oh my God, why on earth did we let you get your hands on it? So it's, which I empathise with.
Right. Okay, so what's been the most encouraging then? What's the most encouraging aspect of what you...
That you can do it.
Yeah.
I think the most encouraging aspect is that you actually can do it. But just a bit more fun.
Yeah.
I really hate sending out review copies because 90% of them, A, they don't get reviewed.
Yes.
And B, appear on eBay a week later for sale. So actually undercutting your sales. Also, it costs a lot in postage. So I try to send PDFs, but then people say, "Oh, I'm
not going to read them." That's what I say. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So then I say, "Okay, I'll send you a copy," and if they're within walking distance, and I walk quite a lot, I deliver them the same day. The shock on their face, and it's not just review copies; it's for media, and I go down to TV Centre and deliver a book, and the shock on their face, and I can't help feeling that because I delivered it by hand, it'll get a better ride somehow.
Yeah,
and it does seem to be the case. I put that under the category of fun, but it's also, I think, helpful.
Okay, so yeah, what about encouraging then? What about encouraging?
Encouraging. the book is not dead. Long-form writing is still there. That people are still willing to dedicate a certain amount of time to a book rather than a blog. That podcasts seem to be supportive of book sales rather than replacing them. That whilst the industry as a whole is obsessing, to my mind, about the need for more variety in the author base, i.e. more non-white, non-male, non-heterosexual, which I get. It turns out that is actually happening without any legal requirements for it to happen, just that the quality of people writing from those various communities is on the rise, so they want to do it and people want to read about it. So I think that's all happening, and it's really encouraging. The marketplace is a little bit more monopolised than I would like to see, but not desperately so. To name names, Amazon has a very, very strong hold on the distribution channels, of course, but I do not think it abuses that position. I may have to retract that at some point when they are, but right now they do not seem to be abusing that position, so that's great. It allows for independent retailers to set up independent or alternative web offerings to establish themselves. So that's encouraging as well. And I suppose the biggest threat, but equally the greatest encouragement, is that the copyright seems to be holding. It's challenged on a regular basis, but it's holding. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, in the great words of Donald Trump. But it's true. Just about every jurisdiction in the world has had a crack at it, including Canada for the government's sins. But actually, it's resilient, and like those skyscrapers in Tokyo that bend with the earthquake so they don't fall over, the flexibility that's within copyright has allowed it to stave off attacks. So I find that very encouraging.
Yeah, in fact, this is a good note to end on. You published a book about fairness.
Yes.
And
to be fair.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's a great deal of unfairness still in our world.
Yeah.
The mega rich going untaxed, for example.
It's an important book, this. Yeah.
It deals with that, I assume.
This is an important book.
Yeah.
It deals with just about everything. If I just read. Fairness in history, fairness in sport, fairness in business, fairness in law, fairness in communication and technology, fairness in politics and government, fairness in human relationship. And it talks about the neurology and psychology of fairness, because it's quite hardwired. So there's some science in there as well. A good question, is fairness a creation of the English-speaking world? No, it's not. Although very few languages have the exact word in their language for fairness, but they have some variants of it. No, it's important, and literature is a driver of fairness, I think, unlike politics and economics.
And fairness is what drives, I would think, quite a bit of important publishing. The idea that there's an injustice that needs to be corrected
Yeah, I wouldn't overdo that one, Nigel. I think that Penguin Random House would rather publish Harry and Meghan than. But a lot of that is in the field of academic publishing as much as in general book publishing.
Yes.
And I would, when you said is your list a reflection of you as a person?
Yeah.
I think you can argue that much more strongly. So, for instance, the philosophy editor at Chicago University Press will curate a list which will be reflective of what he or she thinks is going on in the world of philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a strange sort of way, I think they do it's more realistic job on that than the general book publishers,
mm-hmm.
who by and large just go with the trend. Yeah.
Back
to fairness. I mean,
yeah.
I just wanted to say that the whole concept of Mensch is about fairness. We pay everyone the same. It is fair. I do not pay big advances to one person and therefore have to do a write-off and claw it back by lower royalties from other people, which is unfair in my view. There's cross-subsidy. So every one of them stands on their own 2 feet. Or on mine, sometimes,
right.
Or on my toes.
Well, and as I say, what you've said is encouraging because apparently you don't have to be rich to get into the publishing business, and you can do quite well regardless of who you are, which is also fair.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, though. I don't know. My pay per hour is probably well below the minimum wage.
Yes, but you don't need that now. It's fun per minute. It's what
Exactly. That's why I do it.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't go into it expecting to make a lot of money, because that's not the point.
No.
But there is one other commercial point, though, which is after I stop doing it because I'm dead or whatever may happen, the books will go on.
Yes.
And some of them will, some will just die. But some of them will go on, and so there will be revenue into the future with no cost. So although I'm getting paid below the minimum wage, maybe in the future, when I'm doing very little work, there will be a pension or something.
Yeah. Well, I
won't rely on it.
No. I was just visiting a friend in Toronto. His name is Jack David, and after lunch we went back to his offices, and I had a little tour of his backlist, and I was just so impressed. What a wonderful way to spend a life. And tangible and lasting, and so it's just it's impressive what you're doing, Richard, and thanks for telling me about it.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm enjoying it. I enjoy talking to you, but I enjoy the business, and Mensch is there. And I haven't been sued yet. That's the one thing that hasn't happened yet. It's only a matter of time.
Well, yeah, maybe something you've said today.
I told. Oh, God help me! But no, I mean technically, I don't own the trademark in Mensch, obviously, because it's not trademarkable. So I guess someone else might have a crack at me for that. But let them try. Let them try.
Very good. Well, follow your progress as always with interest.
Yeah, and keep on doing this. You're doing a fine job for the industry.
Thank you.
You're creating a really significant archive, which a university at some point should take off your hands and curate it forever. So there you are.
Well, I'll meet you in forever then, Richard. Thanks again.
Or Frankfurt. All right.
Yeah.
Take care. All the best.
All the best to you, too.
All the very best.
Thank you.
Happy Christmas.
Thank you, and to you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.